Hello and welcome to Uzreport World News, and my name is Bahram Ghafarov. The World Bank said it would further support market reforms underway in Uzbekistan as its Vice President for Europe and Central Asia, Anna Cherdy, met with Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev in Tashkent on May 18. The parties have defined priority areas for the bank's 5-year country partnership framework.
The World Bank welcomes the government's plans to continue a transparent and inclusive market transition and implement difficult but much-needed market reforms. Despite the COVID-19 crisis, we'll further support the reform agenda through our new country partnership framework. It will define priority areas for the bank's financing and advisory services from 2022 to 2026 and will be aligned with Uzbekistan's next development strategy, said Bier. The discussions focused on the government's efforts to enact market reforms, reduce poverty and unemployment, raise the living standards of the population in rural areas, improve access to health, education, social protection and water supply services, create conditions conducive for private sector-led growth, and improve the business and investment climate.
The Uzbek government has made a decision to sell its share to banks in a bid to raise investments, new credit lines, improve the financial stability, as well as to expand the range of provided services. The State Asset Management Agency said that the government was intending to sell its entire block of shares at Poytaxt Bank and Uzagro Export Bank.
State shares in both banks are to be realized on the terms of maximizing their transaction value. Deloitte was picked as consultant for the privatization process of Poytaxt Bank, while Grant Thornton is to deal with Uzagro Export Bank. The application process is open to all interested parties. Foreign banks with an intention to buy a stake must meet the following criteria. The authorized capital and credit rating should not be lower than the equivalent of 200 million euros and the investment grade BBB- respectively. The existence of an agreement on the exchange of information between the central bank and the banking supervision authority of a foreign bank. The presence of a written confirmation by the regulator proving that this bank is under its consolidated supervision, has the right to receive funds for deposits, and has been granted permission by the banking supervision authority to establish or participate in the authorized capital of the bank, or confirmation that such permission is not required. Poytaxt Bank, as of April 1st this year, had $21 million worth of assets. It received over $190,000 of net profit in the first quarter. Uzagro Export Bank's assets as of April 1st stood at $5.6 million, down 50% year-on-year. The first quarter with a net loss of $3.9 million.
The Uzbek State Committee for Defense Industry said it was testing a brand new domestic lightly armored SUV. So-called Talon was designed and produced by the Order of Armored Forces. The tests include checking the compliance of the armored vehicle with ballistic protection standards, its ability to move and overcome various obstacles in mountainous and rough terrain. An all-wheel drive SUV with capacity of 300 horsepower was made of armored steel, accommodates up to 11 people. Its protection class corresponds to international standards of CIS Ghost and NATO STANAG. The cruising range on the highway is at least 750 kilometers. The vehicle is designed to guard and escort convoys, ambulance transportation, engineering, radiation, chemical and biological reconnaissance and fire support. The Agency for the Protection of Consumer Rights under the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Uzbekistan has drawn up a draft law that provides for the introduction of financial penalty for the sale of goods with an expired date, without the date of issue and expiration date, as well as counterfeit goods. Those who violate the rules would face financial sanctions worth some $1,200. The agency said it had received 157 appeals on the facts of the sale of expired goods in 2020. Most cases were registered in Tashkent. The results of the Irish company Ookla shows that the internet speed in Uzbekistan had increased 1.5 times from 25.82 megabytes per second to 39.2 megabytes per second within a span of 1 year. My colleague has more.
There are 18.60 million internet users in Uzbekistan as of January this year. The surprising fact is that the number of users in the country increased by 260,000 year on year. But again, only 10% of the population in Uzbekistan has access to 4G internet, while majority still use either 2G or 3G. Now Wincom Technologies Corporation is aiming to expand Uzbekistan's external internet channel, the project costing around $25.9 million. Good news is that the internet mobile data affordability is still at a moderate level for Uzbeks. Though Uzbekistan ranks 21st in terms of mobile data affordability, the average price 1 gigabyte of mobile internet in the country is just 60 cents. The nation with the cheapest internet is Israel, followed by Kyrgyzstan. The average price of 1 gigabyte of mobile traffic in Uzbekistan had been reduced by $2 within a year. The number of mobile connections in Uzbekistan in January 2021 was equivalent to 69.2% of the total population. Recently, the number of social media users in Uzbekistan is increasing rapidly, numbering 1.4 million, which is 13.6% of the total population.
Waiving intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines will not be enough to narrow the huge supply gap between rich and poor countries. That was the verdict of the head of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, on Thursday. South Africa and India have urged fellow WTO members to waive IP rights to boost production for poorer countries. Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, has administered the fewest vaccines relative to its population of any region, roughly 8 doses per 1,000 people versus 150 doses globally, according to the WHO. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has warned that situation could lead to vaccine apartheid. But speaking to the European Parliament, Okonjo-Iweala said it was clear an IP waiver alone would not be enough without the transfer of technology and know-how.
To have solved the problem, the unacceptable problem of inequity in access to vaccines, we have to be holistic. It's not one or the other. If we don't pursue a comprehensive strategy that I outlined before, I do not believe that we will increase the volume of vaccines.
US President Joe Biden has said he supports the waiver idea. But the European Union and other developed countries have said it will not increase output. Big pharmaceuticals companies have opposed the move, saying vaccine development is unpredictable and costly, and that strong intellectual property protection provided the incentive for the development of vaccines in record time.
There was calm over the skyline in Gaza City early Friday morning after Israel and Hamas agreed to cease fire across the border, a potentially tenuous halt to the fiercest fighting in decades following days of destruction and attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said his security cabinet had voted unanimously in favor of a mutual and unconditional Gaza truce proposed by Egypt. Hamas said the ceasefire would be mutual and simultaneous. Abu Ubaidah is the spokesman of the Hamas armed wing.
With the help of God, we were able to humiliate the enemy, its fragile entity, and its savage army. The whole world saw the shame of this regime, whose leaders are proud of striking buildings and houses. They are also proud of killing children and women.
U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed the agreement from the White House and urged calm from both sides.
The United States committed to working with the United Nations, and we remain committed to working with the United Nations and other international stakeholders to provide rapid humanitarian assistance and to marshal international support for the people of Gaza and the Gaza reconstruction efforts. I believe the Palestinians and Israelis equally deserve to live safely and securely and to enjoy equal measures of freedom, prosperity, and democracy. My administration will continue our quiet, relentless diplomacy toward that end.
Amid growing global alarm at the bloodshed, pressure had been mounting for days for a halt to the fighting. On Wednesday, President Biden urged Netanyahu to seek de-escalation, while Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations sought mediation. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had ordered 2 security delegations into Israel and the Palestinian territories to work towards upholding the ceasefire, Egyptian state TV reported. Since the fighting began on May 10th, health officials in Gaza said 232 Palestinians, including 65 children, had been killed and more than 1,900 wounded in aerial bombardments. Authorities put the death toll in Israel at 12, with hundreds of people treated for injuries in rocket attacks that caused panic and sent people rushing into shelters. The violence was triggered by Palestinian anger at what they saw as Israeli curbs on their rights in Jerusalem, including during police confrontations with protesters at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Hamas previously demanded that any halt to the Gaza fighting be accompanied by Israeli drawdowns in Jerusalem. An Israeli official told Reuters there was no such condition in the truce.
The CEO of China's ByteDance, co-founder Zhang Yiming, is stepping down. ByteDance owns TikTok, the short video app that has become a global sensation. Zhang made the announcement in an internal memo seen by Reuters on Thursday and said he would be succeeded by co-founder and head of human resources Rubo Liang. The move is the biggest corporate shakeup at the company since its launch in 2012 and comes after several months of deliberation. In his memo, Zhang said he would have a greater impact on the company's longer-term initiatives if he transitioned out of the CEO role. He also confessed to not being an ideal manager. He wrote, quote, "The truth is, I lack some of the skills that make an ideal manager. I'm more interested in analyzing organizational and market principles rather than actually managing people." Zhang also called his successor Liang an invaluable partner and that the pair would work together over the next 6 months to ensure a smooth transition.
There's just 2 months to go before the Olympic Games are due to kick off in Japan. Soon the world's athletes will be descending on Tokyo, but residents there remain divided about whether they should be welcomed.
As a Tokyo local, I feel conflicted. If we hold the Olympics, there is no doubt variants will enter Japan.
Keiko Yamamura is a yoga teacher. She is just one of many people Reuters asked about the Games, from doctors to sushi chefs. Many were conflicted about whether the gamble of hosting this summit is still worth it. The Olympics have already been delayed for a year due to the pandemic, but Japan has seen a resurgence of COVID cases and is under its 3rd state of emergency. Dr. Kazuhiro Miura fears that his clinic will be overstretched if the event goes ahead. He also raises concern about Japan's low vaccination rate, among the slowest of any major developed nation.
The biggest issue is manpower. We need to send all of our medical resources and manpower to various places. We need people to be inoculated with vaccines and work at the Olympics, but in order to do that, we can't stop regular medical examinations at local clinics like mine. If we do, the medical system will collapse, so we need to protect the hospitals.
Others are more concerned about the consequences of not holding the Games. Restaurant owner Takashi Yonohana thinks it would affect Japan's international standing. The last time the country hosted the event was in 1964, when the country was booming.
I don't want it to be cancelled. I want it to go ahead because we will be seen as a country that has cancelled the Olympics around the world, I think in the next 100 years. When I think about that, I think it's better to hold it than regret not doing it.
The government has vowed to hold what it calls a safe and secure Olympics. Still, recent opinion polls show a majority of Japanese residents either want the Games cancelled or postponed.
As Bosnia-Herzegovina prepares to switch from coal to renewables, the country's miners face an uncertain future. Workers at the Abid Lolic pit fear its closure will bring financial collapse to the central region, wreaking ruin upon its 15,000 inhabitants. Adis Kasumovic is the mine's director.
The whole valley of Nova Bila is financially dependent on this mine. If it stops working, there will be a big financial collapse in this valley as people won't have anything to live from.
Miners were once a trademark of the former Yugoslav Republic, rich in coal. A miner even features on one of the country's banknotes. But Bosnia and its Western Balkan neighbors who are clamoring to join the EU have pledged to reduce CO2 emissions and close their coal mines by 2050, in line with the rest of Europe. Major restructuring plans are in the works. The government says that no miner will lose a job in the process, but thousands of families fear unemployment as the country has yet to develop alternative job schemes. Senad Kasumovic has worked at the Abid Lolic mine for 28 years.
My grandfather, father, and brothers who worked here all earned a pension. I hope I will earn one too.
Unions have announced a general strike and subsequent protests until their demands for socially sensitive restructuring have been respected. Some, such as the ecologist Anis Podic, says the pressures on the coal industry are less to do with sustainability and more rooted in inefficiency and corruption.
A 2008 study examining energy in the whole country of Bosnia-Herzegovina found major problems with the productivity of a number of mines. When you add corruption and employ people along political party lines, then you get the current situation, in which the chaos is caused not so much by the pressure to switch to renewable energies, but by the general state of Bosnian-Herzegovinian society.
It turned out to be a tasty day on Wall Street after a strong debut for plant-based milk company Oatly. The stock jumped as high as 30% in opening day trade, at one point giving it a market value of about $13 billion. The milk alternative company already has some street cred thanks to backing from entertainment A-listers such as Oprah Winfrey and Jay-Z. It also has a supplier contract locked down with Starbucks. Oatly is credited for jump-starting demand for oat milk and is widely credited for popularizing it in several countries. It now sells in more than 20 markets across Europe, the United States, and China, and is so popular in some places that it has faced supply shortages. The $1.4 billion raised from the IPO will be used to help address those bottlenecks and fuel further expansion. Plant-based foods have quickly grown in popularity, especially among millennials and Generation Z consumers who are not shy in backing healthy and environmentally friendly brands. Oatly is not the first animal alternative company to go public. Beyond Meat, with its faux burgers, made its stock market debut 2 years ago and has seen its stock price quadruple. And sources tell Reuters Impossible Foods is prepping a public listing which could value that fake meat company at around $10 billion. Shares of Oatly closed the day with a near 19% gain.
Lebanon expanded its subsidy program last year even as its hard currency reserves plummeted. As well as local producers, that was meant to help long-suffering ordinary Lebanese, but as usual, critics say, they've instead borne the brunt of mismanagement, while smugglers profit from the scheme. Fuel, for example, swallows about half of the subsidy bill, or $3 billion. But the cheap fuel is smuggled into neighbouring Syria, where it goes for 10 times the price. That leads to severe shortages for Lebanese already grappling with a devastating economic crisis. Resident Mohammed Maktabi says he's been driving around Beirut for 2 days. This livestock trader in the northern city of Tripoli says big dollars can be made by buying animals from abroad with subsidised dollars and smuggling them out again. A sheep imported from Armenia at $100 a head can sell in the Gulf for over $200.
The sheep are all getting exported abroad. They are all exported. There is nothing in the local market.
The expanded subsidy list doesn't just include essentials. Cocoa powder, cashew nuts and saffron are on it. Those who most need access to cheap goods can struggle to get them. Under the rules, subsidised food must go straight from importer to retailer, which cuts out wholesalers who reach small shops and remote areas. So while expensive French butter goes cheap at upscale Beirut supermarkets, others have to brawl for subsidised cooking oil. Profiteering means items with Lebanese subsidy stickers have shown up in Europe and Africa. Caretaker Economy Minister Raoul Neme told Reuters the programme was only meant to last a few months when it came in a year ago, and the government had hoped to move quickly to directly subsidising families with cash. Money for the subsidies could run out by the end of May, officials say. Yet another blow for the more than half of Lebanese who live in poverty.
Wall Street snapped a 3-day losing streak Thursday thanks to a continued drop in new unemployment claims. First-time applications for jobless assistance dropped to 444,000 last week. That's the third straight fall and the lowest number since the health crisis pushed millions out of work last year. The Dow rallied 188 points. The S&P 500 gained 43. The Nasdaq surged 236. Despite the strong session, market internals point to a stock market that could face more turbulence ahead, says Reuters Stocks Buzz editor Terence Gabriel.
When you see sort of the pillars of support within the broader market start to deteriorate as they have done, then it's there fewer and fewer stocks holding up the market, and therefore it can be vulnerable to a change in sentiment and a deeper decline.
In company news, Ford was in the spotlight after unveiling an electric version of its best-selling F-150 pickup truck. The company says customer demand is so strong that it is increasing production targets. The Ford F-150 Lightning is due out later this year. Shares of Ford rose 3%. By the way, electric car leader Tesla was up as well. Retail had a breakdown Thursday. High-end apparel maker Ralph Lauren saw a 10% drop in North American sales last quarter, and the company gave a company-wide full-year sales outlook that was below analyst estimates. The stock was down 7%. Shares of Oatly, the maker of plant-based milk backed by A-listers such as Oprah Winfrey, Jay-Z, and Natalie Portman, soared in their stock market debut after raising $1.4 billion in an IPO.
So far, these have been the latest news for today. Goodbye. Take care.